living with righteousness. Imagine a world where people treat one another with respect and dignity. And when conflicts come up, they work hard to make things right. In the Bible, this way of living is called righteousness. It sounds wonderful, but the question is, how do we know what it really means to do right by others? For Jesus, and for other Jewish teachers, the answer was in the scriptures, the Torah and the prophets. God's wisdom is hidden in those ancient laws if we take time to reflect on them. And in his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus shows us how to uncover that wisdom. He quotes a command from the Torah, and then explains the deeper meaning behind it. The first example, murder. Jesus begins with the command, "You shall not murder." But then he adds that even anger or insulting words bring guilt. Of course, anger and murder are not equal in effect, but both come from the same root, not valuing another person's life. Murder is the extreme way of saying, your life doesn't matter. But so is belittling someone or losing your temper at them. For Jesus, the real point is clear. Righteousness means treating every human being as valuable, made in the image of God. The second example, adultery. Next, Jesus takes the command, "You shall not commit adultery." And he explains that even looking at someone to stir up desire is already adultery in the heart. He is not talking about simply noticing beauty. He's warning against the kind of gaze or thought that reduces a person to an object for pleasure. That mindset strips away their dignity, even if no action follows. To show how serious this is, Jesus says, "If your eye or hand causes you to sin, cut it off." This is hyperbole, but it drives home the point. Deal seriously with whatever corrupts your heart. In Scripture, sex is a beautiful gift. But if desire dishonors others or ourselves, it damages relationships and destroys trust. The third example, divorce. Then Jesus speaks about divorce. In his culture, only men could end a marriage, and many did so for selfish reasons. Some teachers allowed divorce only in cases of adultery. Others said it could be for almost anything, even dissatisfaction. This imbalance gave men power and left women unprotected. So Jesus sided with the stricter view. Divorce is valid only in the case of sexual immorality. He makes it clear that if a man divorces his wife for the wrong reason, he forces her into a vulnerable position. In God's eyes, the covenant is still intact, and any new marriage becomes adultery. In that society, his words defended women and lifted their dignity. For Jesus, marriage was meant to be built on trust, respect, and unity, so that together, husband and wife reflect God's image. The bigger lesson. Through these three examples, murder, adultery, and divorce, Jesus shows that God's commands are not just about rules. Someone might never kill, never cheat, and never divorce, yet still live with anger, lust, or selfishness. And that still dishonors people. True righteousness is about more than avoiding wrong. It's about honoring every human being as someone of ultimate worth. If we live this way, our homes, our communities, and even the world would look completely different. This is what Jesus meant when he spoke of God's kingdom coming on earth. Ordinary people living with dignity, respect, and love toward every person they meet. And if you're still listening right now, it probably means this message matters to you. I've put real effort into bringing it to life, and your support is what keeps it going. So if you found this meaningful, hit subscribe, because tomorrow there's a piece of good news waiting for you, something that can brighten your day. Living a life of true respect. Imagine a world where every person is treated with care and dignity, where even in difficult situations, people try to act fairly and kindly toward each other. In the Bible, this way of living is called righteousness. It sounds simple, but how do we know what it truly means to do right by others? Jesus taught that God's wisdom can be found in the scriptures, the Torah and the prophets. These laws were not just rules for the past. They guide us in shaping our hearts and actions today. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus explains this through examples. He quotes a command from the Torah, then reveals the deeper principle behind it. The first example, murder and anger. Jesus begins with the command, "You shall not murder." Then he says that even anger or insulting words are serious. It's not that anger equals murder, but both reflect a lack of respect for others. Murder is the extreme, saying someone's life doesn't matter. But insults, anger, or contempt show the same attitude in smaller ways. For Jesus, true righteousness is about controlling our emotions, valuing others, and choosing peace instead of hostility. The second example, adultery and thoughts. Next, Jesus speaks about adultery. He teaches that even looking at someone with lust or objectifying them is already wrong in the heart. He isn't condemning normal attraction. He warns against treating someone as an object for pleasure. These thoughts harm the dignity of another person, even if no physical action occurs. Jesus uses strong words. If your eye or hand causes you to sin, remove it. The point is clear. The root of sin is in the heart, and we must address it seriously. Sex is a good and beautiful gift, but if it leads to dishonor or broken relationships, it damages everyone involved. The third example, divorce and responsibility. Finally, Jesus addresses divorce. In his time, only men could initiate divorce, often for selfish reasons. Some teachers allowed divorce only for adultery. Others allowed almost any reason. This left women vulnerable and unprotected. Jesus clarified that divorce is valid only in cases of sexual immorality. Ending a marriage for selfish reasons harms the spouse and breaks the covenant. By doing this, Jesus protected women's dignity and emphasized that marriage should be based on respect, trust, and partnership, reflecting God's image together. The deeper lesson. Across these examples, murder, adultery, and divorce, Jesus teaches that real righteousness is more than just following rules. We may avoid killing, cheating, or divorcing, but if our hearts are filled with anger, lust, or selfishness, we still harm others. True righteousness is about valuing every person, controlling desires, and treating others with fairness and care. Imagine a world where everyone lived this way. Communities would be safer, families stronger, and relationships built on trust. This is the vision of God's kingdom on earth. Ordinary people choosing to honor and protect the value of every human life. Living a life of kindness. Imagine a world where everyone truly cares about others, where people listen, help, and treat each other fairly, even when things go wrong. In the Bible, This way of living is called righteousness. It sounds simple, but how do we actually practice it in daily life? For Jesus and other teachers of his time, the key was found in God's scriptures, the Torah and the prophets. These ancient teachings hold wisdom for guiding our actions and shaping our hearts. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gives clear examples. He first refers to a command from Scripture, then explains the deeper truth behind it. The first example, anger and forgiveness. Jesus starts with anger. He says, even if you haven't physically hurt someone, holding anger or resentment is serious. Why? Because anger shows that we are not valuing the other person's life or feelings. Hurting someone physically is obvious. But speaking harshly, thinking ill, or refusing to forgive also damages relationships and communities. True righteousness, according to Jesus, is learning to forgive, control anger, and treat others with respect. The second example, honesty and truth. Next, Jesus talks about keeping promises. He warns against swearing or making false promises, because dishonesty breaks trust. It's not just about avoiding lies. It's about cultivating integrity so that others can rely on you and feel safe in your words. If our words are careless or manipulative, we harm people even if no physical action occurs. God values truth in our hearts, and living honestly reflects that value. The third example, loving others. Then Jesus challenges us to go beyond fairness, to love even those we find difficult. He says, treat enemies and those who hurt you with kindness, not revenge. This is radical because it goes against natural instincts. But it protects communities, builds peace, and honors the worth of every person, even when they seem undeserving. Righteousness is more than avoiding harm. It's actively choosing love, respect, and compassion in every interaction. The bigger lesson. Across these examples, anger, honesty, and love, Jesus shows that true righteousness starts inside. Following rules is not enough. We must examine our intentions, our thoughts, and the way we treat others every day. Imagine if everyone lived this way, controlled anger, spoke truth, and loved even their enemies. Homes, schools, workplaces, and communities would be full of respect, safety, and trust. This is the kingdom Jesus spoke about. Ordinary people reflecting God's goodness in their daily actions. And if you've listened to this far, it shows you care about making a difference. I've worked hard to bring this message to life, and your support matters. So if you found this meaningful, subscribe. Because tomorrow, a little surprise or blessing awaits you. Something you'll notice and feel in your day.